Commander ZYX clicked her mandibles in satisfaction as she reviewed the latest galactic survey reports. The bridge of her warship Crimson Talon hummed with the controlled chaos of her crew preparing for another conquest. As the supreme commander of the Vortak Empire's expansion fleet, she had overseen the subjugation of 47 worlds in the past cycle alone. Status report, she demanded, her forearms working efficiently across multiple control panels. All systems optimal, Commander, replied her tactical officer, Lieutenant Krexpor.
The next target system shows standard Class M worlds with primitive civilizations. Nothing that should pose any challenge to the Empire.
ZYX species, the Vortak, had evolved on Kethmor, a world where survival meant constant battle against acid storms, predators with diamond-hard claws, and gravity 3 times stronger than most inhabited worlds.
They were warriors by necessity, conquerors by nature.
For the past 1,000 years, they had swept across the galaxy, encountering only soft, weak species that folded before their might. The Vortak weren't the only Deathworlders in the galaxy, but they were certainly the most successful. The Grimlock from the ice world of Frostheim were fierce fighters but lacked strategic thinking. The Saurian hegemony from their volcanic homeworld possessed good tactics but poor technology. The crystal beings from the radiation-soaked Nexus Prime were dangerous but few in number. What makes us different, ZYX often told her troops, is that we combine the ferocity of true Deathworlders with intelligence and discipline.
We are evolution's perfect warriors. The bridge's main screen displayed their current target, a small yellow star with several rocky planets.
Intelligence reports indicated the third planet harbored a young civilization that had barely achieved primitive spaceflight. They called themselves humans and their world Earth.
Biological analysis complete, Commander, announced Science Officer Velterra. The target species shows typical garden world characteristics.
Average height 1.7 meters, single heart, limited muscle density, thin skin vulnerable to minor injuries. Their world gravity is only 68% of Kethmor standard.
ZYX mandibles clicked in amusement.
Another soft species ripe for conquest.
Military assessment?
Primitive kinetic weapons, basic chemical explosives, rudimentary nuclear technology, replied Krexpor. Their largest military forces number in the millions, but they're scattered across multiple political entities that appear to be in constant conflict with each other.
No unified planetary defense. Expected resistance duration?
Standard projections indicate complete subjugation within 48 hours of initial contact, Commander.
Their weapons cannot penetrate our ship armor, and our personnel shields will render their infantry weapons useless.
The Vortak had perfected this process.
Arrive in overwhelming force, demonstrate superior firepower, demands surrender.
Most species capitulated immediately when faced with the reality of their situation. Those that didn't learn quickly that resistance only brought greater suffering.
Excellent. Set course for the Sol system.
ZYX settled back in her command throne, already composing her report to the High Command.
Another easy victory to add to the Empire's growing list.
3 weeks later, the Vortak fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. 12 massive dreadnoughts, each carrying 10,000 warriors, accompanied by countless support vessels. It was overkill for a primitive civilization, but the Empire believed in thorough demonstrations of power. Commander, we're detecting multiple artificial objects throughout the system, reported Velterra. Primitive space stations orbiting the third and fourth planets, several small vessels moving between worlds.
Any reaction to our arrival? Increased communication chatter from the planet's surface. They've definitely detected us. ZYX nodded approvingly.
Fear was a useful tool in negotiations.
Open a communication channel to their planet. Let's begin the standard conquest protocol.
The main screen shifted to show a blue-green world marbled with white clouds.
Beautiful, in its way. It would make an excellent agricultural world once the humans were relocated to designated labor colonies. Channel open, Commander.
ZYX activated the translation matrix and began the speech she'd given dozens of times before. Inhabitants of Earth, I am Commander ZYX of the Vortak Empire. Your world has been selected for integration into our domain. You will immediately surrender all military forces and prepare for planetary occupation.
Compliance will ensure your survival. Resistance will result in extermination. You have 1 of your hours to respond. The channel closed.
Now came the waiting period, during which the target species typically panicked, argued among themselves, and eventually saw reason.
The Vorthak had refined psychological warfare to an art form. "Commander," Krexfor called out, "we're receiving a response already." That was faster than usual.
ZYX-Thera activated the screen, expecting to see a terrified planetary leader begging for terms. Instead, she found herself looking at a calm human male in some kind of military uniform. Behind him, she could see what appeared to be a command center bustling with activity, but the human seemed remarkably composed for a species facing extinction. "This is General Marcus Harrison, speaking for the United Nations Security Council," the human said. His voice was steady, almost conversational.
"We've received your ultimatum and appreciate your directness.
However, we must respectfully decline your generous offer of surrender."
ZYX-Thera blinked all four eyes in surprise. "You decline? Perhaps you don't understand your situation. We have 12 dreadnoughts capable of sterilizing your entire planet."
"Oh, we understand perfectly," Harrison replied.
"We've been watching your empire's expansion for the past several months. Impressive work, really. Very efficient.
But you seem to have made a small miscalculation."
"What miscalculation?"
"You assumed we were like the other species you've conquered. Soft. Weak. Unprepared." Harrison's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted.
"General, are you familiar with the concept of a death world?" ZYX-Thera's mandibles clicked in irritation.
"Of course. My species evolved on the greatest death world in known space.
That is why we are the galaxy's apex predators." "Interesting. Tell me about your homeworld."
Kethmore features acid storms, massive predators, high gravity, and constant geological instability. Only the strongest survive to reproduce."
"Sounds challenging," Harrison agreed. "Our planet has a few interesting features too. Would you like to hear about them?" Despite herself, ZYX-Thera found her curiosity piqued. "Proceed." "Well, let's start with our geology.
Earth sits on massive tectonic plates that are constantly shifting, causing earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. We have storms that can level cities, floods that reshape continents, droughts that last for years, and ice ages that last for millennia." ZYX-Thera's tactical officer whispered, "Standard Death World characteristics, Commander. Our weather systems include tornadoes with winds exceeding 500 km per hour, hurricanes that can destroy entire coastal regions, and lightning strikes that occur millions of times per day. Our atmosphere is 21% oxygen, which makes everything highly flammable."
"Moderately impressive," ZYX-Thera admitted.
"Then, there's our biology. Our planet has produced some fascinating creatures. Sharks that haven't needed to evolve for 400 million years because they're already perfect killing machines. Crocodiles that can crush bones with 13,000 kilograms of force per square centimeter. Blue whales the size of your smaller warships. Jellyfish whose venom can kill in minutes. Viruses and bacteria that can wipe out entire populations." Something cold was beginning to form in ZYX-Thera's stomach. "But the really interesting part," Harrison continued, "is what this environment did to us.
Humans are persistence hunters, General.
We don't have claws or fangs or natural armor. What we have is the ability to never give up. We can run for hours without stopping. We can function on minimal sleep for days. We can survive injuries that would kill most species. We can eat almost anything organic, live in virtually any environment from Arctic tundra to scorching deserts. Every species adapts to its environment," ZYX-Thera said, but her voice lacked its earlier confidence.
"True. But here's what makes us special. We don't just adapt. We overcome.
We take environments that want to kill us and we make them serve us. We've survived ice ages, volcanic winters, asteroid impacts, plagues, and global wars.
Not just survived, thrived."
Harrison stepped closer to his communication device. "General, in our recorded history alone, we've fought over 15,000 wars. We've developed weapons capable of destroying our entire planet multiple times over. We've turned warfare into a science, strategy into an art form, and survival into an obsession. You're trying to intimidate me with primitive accomplishments," ZYX-Thera said, but she was no longer lounging in her command throne.
"Not intimidate. Inform." Harrison's smile was predatory.
You see, when we detected your fleet 3 weeks ago, we did some research on your previous conquests. Very impressive record.
But we noticed something interesting about every species you've defeated.
Which is?
None of them were actually from Deathworlds.
The Zephyrians evolved on a planet with perfect weather and abundant resources. The Crystalline Collective comes from low-gravity worlds with minimal predators. The Ethereal Commonwealth developed on worlds so peaceful they never learned the concept of warfare.
ZYXthera felt her confidence wavering.
The surveys clearly indicated that they lived on what your scientists classified as Deathworlds, yes.
But classification isn't the same as reality. A planet with harsh weather isn't necessarily a Deathworld if the dominant species can simply migrate to avoid it.
A world with dangerous predators isn't a Deathworld if those predators are easily avoided or deterred. Harrison paused, letting his words sink in. Earth, General, is different.
On Earth, the humans aren't just another species trying to survive. We're the apex predators. We're the ones that other creatures fear. We turn wolves into pets, elephants into labor animals, and whales into resources. We didn't adapt to our environment, we made our environment adapt to us.
The bridge of the Crimson Talon had gone silent except for the hum of machinery.
Are you suggesting your species is more dangerous than mine? ZYXthera asked carefully. I'm not suggesting anything, Harrison replied. I'm stating a fact.
Humanity has never encountered a problem we couldn't solve through applied violence, superior technology, or sheer bloody-minded persistence.
Usually all three.
Your confidence is admirable but misplaced.
We have overwhelming technological superiority. Do you?
Our analysis of your fleet suggests your technology is impressive but not revolutionary.
Powerful energy weapons, strong defensive shields, faster than light travel. We've been working on similar technologies for decades. Working on is not the same as possessing.
True.
But you're forgetting something important about humans, General. We're very, very good at learning from our enemies. Alarms suddenly began blaring throughout the Crimson Talon.
Krexvor shouted from his station, Commander.
Multiple objects launching from the planet's surface. Missiles? ZYXthera demanded. Negative.
They're ships, Commander.
Hundreds of them.
The main screen shifted to show Earth's surface. Across multiple continents, massive structures were opening like flowers, revealing hidden launch bays. Ships were rising from concealed positions, not the primitive vessels they'd observed earlier, but sleek, dangerous-looking craft that moved with purpose and coordination.
Impossible, Veltero whispered. Our intelligence showed no evidence of such a fleet.
Harrison's voice cut through their shock.
Did I mention humans are excellent at misdirection?
Those primitive space stations you observed were actually construction platforms.
We've been building ships in hidden asteroid facilities for the past 2 years. 2 years? How did you know we were coming?
The same way we know about your other 12 fleets currently approaching inhabited worlds throughout this galactic arm.
The same way we know about your main base on Kethmore.
The same way we know about your supply lines, your communication protocols, and your tactical preferences.
ZYXthera stared at the screen in growing horror. That's impossible. Our security is absolute. General, let me explain something about human intelligence gathering.
We've been studying you since your first conquest attempt reached our long-range sensors 18 months ago.
We've intercepted your communications, analyzed your technology, and studied your tactics. We know more about the Vorthak Empire than most of your own citizens do.
The human ships were moving into formation now, spreading out in a pattern that looked almost organic, like a swarm of predators surrounding prey.
You want to know what makes humans truly dangerous? Harrison asked. It's not our adaptability or our persistence or even our capacity for violence. It's our ability to turn our enemies' strengths against them. What do you mean?
You're Deathworlders, General. You're tough, strong, and aggressive. But you've spent the last 1,000 years conquering easy targets.
You've forgotten what it's like to fight an enemy that fights back.
The human fleet was taking positions around the Vorthak formation now, their movements coordinated with military precision that spoke of extensive training and preparation. We, on the other hand, have never stopped fighting. Against our environment, against each other, against every challenge our universe has thrown at us.
We've never had the luxury of easy victories.
You cannot hope to match our firepower, ZYX said, but even she could hear the desperation creeping into her voice.
Firepower isn't everything, General. Ask any human military historian about asymmetric warfare. Ask them about Vietnam, Afghanistan, or the Winter War.
Sometimes the smaller force wins through superior strategy, better intelligence, and sheer determination.
The human fleet had completed their encirclement.
ZYX counted at least 300 vessels, each roughly the size of a Vortak cruiser.
Where had they come from? How had an entire fleet been built in secret? Last chance, General, Harrison said. Surrender now, and we'll treat your crews according to the galactic conventions of war.
Continue this aggression, and we'll show you why humans earned the title of Deathworlders the hard way.
ZYX looked around her bridge at her crew. These were Vortak warriors, the finest soldiers in the galaxy.
They had never known defeat, never experienced real fear. But she could see uncertainty in their eyes now, the first cracks in their absolute confidence.
You're bluffing, she said finally.
Even if your ships match ours individually, we still outnumber you.
Actually, you don't, Harrison replied calmly.
But I suppose you'll have to learn that the hard way. The communication channel closed, leaving the bridge of the Crimson Talon in stunned silence.
ZYX stared at the tactical display, watching hundreds of human ships moving with predatory grace around her fleet.
For the first time in her military career, she felt something she'd never experienced before.
Doubt. Commander, Krexvor said quietly, your orders?
ZYX looked at the blue-green world hanging in space below them, beautiful and deceptively peaceful. She thought about the calm confidence in the human general's voice, the ease with which he'd revealed their careful intelligence gathering, the speed with which an entire fleet had appeared from nowhere. Maybe, she thought with growing dread, they weren't the galaxy's only real Deathworlders after all.
Maybe they'd just met their match.
The tactical situation aboard the Crimson Talon deteriorated rapidly as more human ships continued to appear from concealed positions throughout the Sol system. What had initially seemed like a standard conquest was becoming something unprecedented in Vortak military history. Additional contacts emerging from the asteroid belt, reported Sensor Officer Nixvale, her voice tight with controlled panic. Count now exceeds 400 vessels, with more signatures appearing every minute.
ZYX studied the tactical display with growing unease. The human ships weren't behaving like any enemy fleet she'd encountered before.
Instead of forming traditional battle lines or defensive formations, they moved in complex patterns that reminded her uncomfortably of pack hunters from her homeworld. Analysis of their ship designs, Velterra, she commanded. The science officer's tentacles worked frantically across her console. Commander, their technology appears to be a hybrid of multiple galactic civilizations. I'm detecting Zephyrian shield harmonics, crystalline energy distribution systems, and what looks like modified ethereal propulsion technology.
That's impossible. Those species don't share technology.
No, Commander, but they do share something else, Velterra said grimly.
They all lost to us.
And, apparently, they all shared their technical knowledge with the humans.
The implications hit ZYX like a physical blow.
While the Vortak Empire had been systematically conquering civilizations and, considering them eliminated threats, humanity had been building alliances with the survivors. They'd been learning from every defeat, studying every tactical failure, and preparing for this moment.
Incoming transmission from the human fleet, announced Communications Officer Drextha. Put it through.
This time, instead of General Harrison, the screen showed a different human. This one wore what appeared to be naval insignia and stood on the bridge of one of the mysterious ships that had appeared from nowhere.
I'm Admiral Sarah Chen, commanding the Earth Defense Fleet.
General Harrison has transferred tactical authority to me for this engagement. Her voice carried the same unsettling calm that seemed characteristic of these humans.
I'm required to give you one final opportunity to withdraw from our system. We do not retreat, ZYX replied automatically, though the words felt hollow. I suspected as much.
Our psychological analysis indicated that Vortak culture makes surrender extremely difficult.
Chen paused, consulting something off-screen.
General Harrison mentioned that you take pride in being Deathworlders. I thought you might be interested to know that we've been in contact with the other Deathworld species you mentioned earlier. A new section of the display activated, showing what appeared to be additional fleets positioned throughout the system. ships with the distinctive crystalline structures of the Nexus Prime radiation dwellers.
The ice world vessels of the Grimlock. The volcanic forged ships of the Saurian hegemony. How? ZYX Thera whispered.
The same way we made contact with all your former victims, Chen replied.
We listened.
While you were busy conquering, we were busy communicating. It turns out that actual Deathworlders have a lot in common when it comes to dealing with bullies.
Lieutenant Krexvor leaned close to ZYX Thera's command throne.
Commander, the tactical situation has become untenable. We're outnumbered at least 3-1, and we have no intelligence on their capabilities.
The Vortak Empire does not flee from battle, ZYX Thera said, but even she could hear the uncertainty in her voice.
Nor do we, Admiral Chen said, apparently having overheard. But we do believe in fighting smart rather than fighting hard. Let me show you what human tactical doctrine looks like. The human ships suddenly accelerated, their formation shifting from a loose encirclement to something that looked like organized chaos. They moved in groups of 3 or 4, each group following independent flight paths that somehow combined into a larger pattern. Evasive maneuvers. ZYX Thera commanded, but her fleet was designed for overwhelming frontal assault, not the kind of fluid tactical dance the humans were demonstrating.
The first human attack wasn't what anyone expected.
Instead of the massive energy discharges typical of galactic warfare, the human ships released clouds of what sensors initially registered as debris.
Mines?
Krexvor asked. Negative, Velterra replied, studying her readings intently. The objects they're moving independently. Artificial intelligence guidance systems. Thousands of them. The clouds of small objects spread throughout the space around the Vortak fleet, weaving between ships and somehow avoiding the point defense systems that should have destroyed them easily. What are they waiting for?
ZYX Thera wondered aloud.
Her answer came when Admiral Chen's voice returned. The objects you're observing are what we call smart mines, but they're not designed to explode. They're designed to learn.
Learn what?
Everything. Your shield frequencies, your weapon signatures, your communication protocols, your tactical responses. Every ship in your fleet is now being analyzed in real time by thousands of independent AI systems.
As if to demonstrate the point, the small objects suddenly shifted their behavior.
They began synchronizing their movements, and ZYX Thera realized with growing horror that they were mapping her fleet's defensive capabilities. Commander, Velterra announced, I'm detecting massive energy buildups from the human capital ships. The largest human vessels, which had been hanging back during the mine deployment, were now moving forward. As they advanced, ZYX Thera could see why they'd been hidden in the asteroid belt. They weren't just ships, they were mobile weapons platforms unlike anything in the Vortak arsenal.
Those aren't warships, Krexvor said in amazement.
They're siege engines. The human capital ships opened fire, but not with conventional weapons. Instead of energy beams or projectiles, they launched what appeared to be metallic spheres that expanded into complex geometric patterns as they flew.
Nanomachines, Velterra whispered. They're firing clouds of self-replicating nanomachines.
The nanomachine swarms struck the Vortak shields and began to replicate, consuming the energy fields and converting them into more nanomachines. Within minutes, the first Vortak ships found their defensive systems completely compromised. Return fire. ZYX Thera commanded, but her weapons officers were struggling with targeting systems that kept losing lock on the fast-moving human ships.
Commander, the humans are using some kind of electronic warfare system, reported Nixvale. Our targeting computers can't maintain locks.
They're being actively jammed by those smart mines. The reality of the situation was becoming clear. While the Vortak had been perfecting brute force tactics against defenseless opponents, humanity had been developing countermeasures specifically designed to neutralize superior firepower through technological innovation and superior coordination. All ships, concentrate fire on the largest human vessel, ZYX Thera ordered.
If they could eliminate the human flagship, perhaps the rest would lose coordination.
The Vortak fleet focused their weapons on what appeared to be Admiral Chen's command ship, unleashing enough firepower to slag a small moon. The human vessel's shields flared and buckled under the assault, but before the Vortak gunners could celebrate, something extraordinary happened. The other human ships began transferring their own shield energy to the flagship, creating a distributed defense network that absorbed and redirected the Vortak assault. The energy that should have destroyed the human command ship was instead channeled into massive capacitors throughout the human fleet. They're using our weapons fire to charge their systems, Belterra reported in disbelief.
That's impossible. Shield energy can't be redistributed like that.
It can if you redesign the entire fleet to function as a single organism rather than individual ships, Admiral Chen's voice cut in. We learned the technique from studying insect colonies on our world. Specifically, army ants. The charged human fleet now unleashed a coordinated barrage that demonstrated why they'd been storing energy. Instead of firing at the Vorthak ships directly, they targeted the space around them, creating cascading energy fields that disrupted electronics, communications, and navigation systems simultaneously. Within minutes, the proud Vorthak fleet was reduced to a collection of blind, deaf, and confused vessels struggling to maintain basic formation. Commander, Krexfor said urgently, we're receiving surrender demands from the other human fleets.
They're offering terms. Terms? Admiral Chen reappeared on the communication screen.
Standard Galactic Convention, she said matter-of-factly. Immediate cessation of hostilities, inspection and impoundment of military vessels, repatriation of all conquered peoples, and war crimes tribunals for military leadership.
War crimes? ZYXThera's mandibles clicked in outrage. We followed standard conquest protocols. Standard for whom? Chen asked.
The species you conquered never agreed to be conquered.
They never signed treaties accepting Vorthak authority.
From our perspective, you're not an empire, you're a criminal organization operating on a galactic scale.
For the first time, ZYXThera began to understand that humanity didn't just see the Vorthak as military opponents.
They saw them as criminals who needed to be stopped.
What happens if we refuse your terms?
Then, we demonstrate why human military doctrine emphasizes overwhelming force when dealing with threats that refuse to negotiate. Chen's expression didn't change, but something in her voice grew colder.
You've seen our defensive capabilities. You haven't seen what we can do when we stop holding back.
As if summoned by her words, new contacts began appearing on the tactical display. These weren't the ships they'd been fighting, these were something else entirely.
Massive constructs that dwarfed even the largest Vorthak dreadnoughts. What are those? ZYXThera asked, though part of her didn't want to know. Mobile construction platforms, Chen replied. We call them factory ships.
Each one can manufacture a complete battle fleet in approximately 6 hours using raw materials from asteroids and destroyed enemy vessels.
The implications were staggering. The humans hadn't just built a fleet, they'd built the capacity to build infinite fleets. How long have you been preparing for this? ZYXThera asked weakly.
Since the moment we detected your empire's expansion pattern and realized you were heading toward inhabited space, Chen replied.
Approximately 18 months of intensive preparation. 18 months to build all this? 18 months to build the infrastructure.
The actual fleet construction began 3 months ago when our long-range sensors confirmed your approach to our system.
ZYXThera slumped in her command throne.
In 18 months, humanity had accomplished what should have taken decades.
They'd built not just ships, but an entire military-industrial complex designed specifically to counter Vorthak tactics.
There's something else you should know, Chen continued.
This fleet you're facing? It's just the local defense force for our home system.
We have similar installations protecting every inhabited world in this galactic arm.
That's impossible. Is it? You conquered 47 worlds in the last cycle.
We liberated all of them 3 weeks ago and helped them build their own defense fleets. Every species you thought you'd eliminated is now part of a mutual defense alliance with Earth at its center. The communication screen split to show dozens of different alien species, all speaking in unison. The Galactic Defense Alliance stands ready.
ZYXThera recognized them all.
The Zephyrians she'd conquered 2 cycles ago. The crystalline collective that had surrendered without a fight. The ethereal commonwealth that had begged for mercy. All of them were alive, armed, and angry. You see, Commander, Admiral Chen said, you made a fundamental mistake about human nature.
You assumed we thought like you do. You saw conquest as domination. We see it as liberation. Liberation? Every world you conquered is now free. Every species you enslaved has been offered full membership in our alliance. Every technology you hoarded has been shared among peoples who will use it for mutual defense rather than aggression. The tactical display now showed the true scope of the human operation.
It wasn't just a battle fleet, it was a network spanning hundreds of star systems, all coordinated, all armed, all waiting. The Vorthak Empire as you knew it no longer exists, Chen announced. The question now is what role the Vorthak people want to play in the galaxy going forward. Zyxthara looked around her bridge at her crew. These were warriors who had never known defeat, never questioned their empire's righteousness, never imagined a universe where their strength wasn't enough. Now they were faced with a choice that no Vorthak had ever confronted before: adapt or face extinction. What are your terms for our people? Zyxthara asked quietly. Complete demilitarization, democratic government, and participation in the Galactic Defense Alliance as equals rather than conquerors, Chen replied. Your world's resources and population would be used to help rebuild what your empire destroyed. And if we refuse? Chen's expression grew sad rather than angry. Then, we'll treat you the same way you treated every species that refused to surrender to you. The bridge fell silent as the weight of cosmic justice settled over them. The predators had become prey, and the prey had become protectors. 3 days after the Vorthak fleet's surrender, Zyxthara found herself in the most humbling position of her military career, sitting across a negotiation table from the species she'd intended to conquer. The location was a human space station that had somehow materialized in Earth's orbit during the standoff, another demonstration of their impossible construction capabilities. The delegation was unlike anything she'd experienced in a lifetime of conquest. Instead of cowering defeated enemies or arrogant victors, she faced a collection of beings who treated her with professional courtesy while making it clear that they held all the advantages. Admiral Chen sat at the head of the table, flanked by General Harrison and a woman introduced as Dr. Elizabeth Santos, apparently a specialist in post-conflict integration. Around the table sat representatives from every species the Vorthak Empire had conquered, each now carrying themselves with the dignity of free peoples rather than the broken posture of the enslaved. Before we discuss terms, Dr. Santos began, I think it's important that you understand exactly what your empire accomplished and what we've discovered in liberating your former territories. A holographic display activated above the table, showing a three-dimensional map of the galaxy with red markers indicating Vorthak conquests. There were so many red dots that Zyxthara felt a moment of pride despite her current circumstances. 47 star systems, Santos continued, containing a total of 63 inhabited worlds. Approximately 12 billion sentient beings brought under Vorthak control through military force. The display zoomed in on individual systems, showing detailed reports of what human liberation forces had discovered. The pride Zyxthara had felt moments earlier began transforming into something much more uncomfortable. The Zephyrian homeworld, Santos narrated as images appeared. Population reduced from 8 billion to 4 billion. The missing 4 billion were classified in your records as labor casualties. Zyxthara's mandibles clicked defensively. Industrial accidents are unfortunate but inevitable during rapid economic development. Starving people to death while they mine resources for export isn't industrial development, interrupted Kexvara, the Zephyrian representative. Her voice was quiet but carried an edge that made Zyxthara's carapace tingle with warning. It's genocide with extra steps. Santos continued through system after system. The crystalline collective's crystal gardens, which took millennia to grow, had been strip-mined in months for exotic materials. The ethereal Commonwealth's vast libraries of philosophical and artistic works had been destroyed as frivolous materials that interfered with productivity. The aquatic Nereid civilization had seen their ocean worlds turned into mining operations that poisoned the very water they breathed. I think, General Harrison said when the presentation ended, you're beginning to understand why we didn't see this as a war between equals. This was an intervention to stop ongoing crimes against sentience itself. Zyxthara struggled to process what she was seeing. In Vorthak culture, conquest was natural, inevitable, even necessary. Strong species dominated weak ones. Resources belonged to those powerful enough to take them. This was the way the universe worked. You're applying your moral standards to our actions, she said finally. The Vorthak Empire brought order to chaos, purpose to waste, strength to weakness. And you did it, Admiral Chen replied, by destroying everything that made those civilizations worth preserving in the first place. The holographic display shifted to show current images from the liberated worlds. Zephyrian cities were being rebuilt according to their original architectural principles rather than Vorthak industrial efficiency. Crystalline gardens were slowly growing back under careful tending. The ethereal Commonwealth was reconstructing their libraries from hidden archives that had somehow survived. This is what we mean by liberation, Santos explained. Not just removing your military forces, but helping these peoples rebuild what you destroyed.
Impossible, Zyxthera said. The resources required would be enormous.
No species commits that level of effort for strangers.
But that's exactly what makes humans dangerous, said a new voice.
Zyxthera turned to see a being she didn't recognize, crystal in structure, but not from the collective. This one pulsed with different frequencies of light.
I am resonance of ancient wisdom, the being said, from the Nexus Prime radiation dwellers.
We were not conquered by your empire, but we have been watching your expansion for many cycles.
Why didn't you intervene? Because we assumed, like you did, that strength was the only language the universe understood.
We protected ourselves but did nothing for those who couldn't protect themselves. The crystal being's light pattern shifted to what Zyxthera somehow understood was regret.
The humans taught us something we had forgotten.
Which is
that true strength isn't the ability to destroy.
It's the ability to create, to protect, to build something better than what existed before.
Admiral Chan leaned forward. Commander, I want you to understand something about human military doctrine. We don't fight wars to win territory or resources. We fight wars to end them. Permanently. What do you mean? Every conflict in human history has taught us the same lesson: victory isn't defeating your enemy. Victory is making sure you never have to fight that enemy again. And the only way to do that sustainably is to turn your enemies into allies.
General Harrison activated another display.
Right now, former Vorthak territories are being integrated into the Galactic Defense Alliance.
Not as subjects or protectorates, but as equal members. Every species you conquered is now contributing to a mutual defense network that makes future conquest attempts impossible. The scope of what the humans had accomplished was staggering. In the 3 weeks since their fleets had appeared, they'd somehow coordinated the liberation of dozens of star systems, established supply lines across hundreds of light years, and created a political structure that included species who had never known each other existed.
How? Zyxthera asked.
Even with your technology, coordinating this kind of operation should take years.
Dr. Santos smiled. We had help.
Every species you conquered kept detailed records of your empire's structure, supply lines, and weaknesses. They knew exactly where to hit for maximum effect because they'd been forced to maintain your infrastructure for you. You turned our conquered peoples into an intelligence network.
We gave them a way to fight back. Every compliant population you controlled was actually a resistance movement waiting for the right moment to act. The implications were staggering.
The Vorthak Empire hadn't been controlling conquered territories, they'd been surrounded by enemies who knew their every weakness and were simply waiting for someone powerful enough to coordinate their rebellion.
There's something else you need to understand, Admiral Chen said. The humans who planned and executed this operation?
Most of them are military retirees and civilian volunteers.
Our actual military is still being held in reserve.
Zyxthera felt her carapace go cold.
Reserve for what?
For whatever's out there beyond your former empire's borders. Because if there's one thing human history has taught us, it's that there's always another threat, always another aggressor who thinks strength means the ability to take what belongs to others. General Harrison brought up a new display showing ship construction statistics. The numbers were incomprehensible.
Thousands of vessels completed, with production rates that suggested exponential growth rather than linear manufacturing. We're not just building a defense fleet, he explained. We're building the infrastructure to help any species defend itself against any threat. Today it's the Vorthak Empire. Tomorrow it might be something worse. Worse than us? Zyxthera asked.
Commander, your empire conquered 47 systems in 1,000 years. Our historical analysis suggests there are plenty of potential threats out there who could do the same damage in a fraction of the time. Resonance of ancient wisdom's light patterns shifted to what Zyxthera was learning to recognize as agreement. The radiation storms beyond the galactic rim hide many things.
Not all of them are as reasonable as humans. Which brings us to our actual proposal, Dr. Santos said. We don't want to destroy the Vorthak people. We want to recruit them.
Recruit us for what? The Galactic Defense Alliance needs experienced warriors who understand what real Deathworld evolution produces, Admiral Chen explained. Your people's combat skills, properly directed, could help protect species that can't protect themselves.
You want us to join your alliance as soldiers?
We want you to join our alliance as equals, General Harrison corrected. Equals who happen to have military expertise that could save lives when the next threat emerges. ZYX-Thera looked around the table at the representatives of species her empire had conquered. None of them looked at her with hatred, despite having every reason to want revenge. Instead, they looked at her with something she'd never seen before: hope. What would membership require? She asked carefully. Complete transparency about your military capabilities and strategic knowledge, Santos replied. Participation in joint training exercises with alliance forces. Commitment to defensive rather than offensive military doctrine. And, most importantly, acceptance that strength exists to protect the weak, not to exploit them.
And, in return?
Full alliance membership, Admiral Chen said.
Access to our technological databases. Mutual defense guarantees. Trade relationships based on cooperation rather than exploitation.
And the chance to be remembered as the empire that chose to become something better. ZYX-Thera was quiet for a long time, processing everything she'd learned. The universe she'd thought she understood, where strength meant domination and conquest was natural, had been revealed as a narrow, destructive delusion. These humans had shown her a different way of thinking about power, one that seemed both alien and strangely appealing. I have to ask, she said finally, why offer us this chance? Your people could simply eliminate us and be done with it. Dr. Santos leaned back in her chair. Because that's what the old universe looked like, Commander. Species fighting species, strength dominating weakness, everyone alone against everyone else. We're trying to build a new universe where cooperation is stronger than conquest. And, because, Admiral Chen added with something that might have been a predatory smile, we've studied your people's psychology extensively. Vorthak warriors aren't motivated by cruelty or greed. They're motivated by the desire to prove their strength. We're offering you the chance to prove your strength by protecting rather than destroying. For the first time since arriving on the human station, ZYX-Thera felt something like hope stirring in her chest. The idea of using her people's warrior culture to defend rather than destroy was both revolutionary and, somehow, inevitable. I'll need to consult with the High Command, she said. Of course, General Harrison replied. Take all the time you need. But, while you're deciding, perhaps you'd like to observe some of our joint training exercises. See what the Alliance looks like in action. As the meeting broke up, ZYX-Thera found herself walking beside Kexvara, the Zephyrian representative. The being she'd once helped enslave was now treating her as a potential ally rather than a former enemy. Can I ask you something? ZYX-Thera said. Of course. Why don't you hate us? After what we did to your people? Kexvara was quiet for a moment. Because the humans taught us something important about justice. Revenge doesn't bring back the dead or rebuild what was destroyed. But, creating something better can honor what was lost. As they walked through the human station, ZYX-Thera began to understand what true Deathworld evolution actually produced. Not just the ability to survive in hostile environments, but the wisdom to transform hostility into cooperation, strength into protection, and enemies into allies. Perhaps, she thought, the humans were right about what made a species truly dangerous. It wasn't the ability to destroy, it was the ability to create something worth protecting. 6 months after the dissolution of the Vorthak Empire, former Commander ZYX-Thera stood on the bridge of the Alliance vessel Unity's Promise, watching a joint training exercise that would have been impossible to imagine under the old order. Vorthak warriors fought alongside Zephyrian engineers, crystalline strategists coordinated with ethereal philosophers, and human tacticians directed operations with a precision that still amazed her. She no longer held the rank of commander. In the Galactic Defense Alliance, she was simply Captain ZYX-Thera, leader of the Vorthak Integration Corps. It was a smaller command than she'd once held, but somehow it felt more significant than commanding an entire conquest fleet. Contact bearing 27 Mark 15, announced Lieutenant Velterra from the sensor station. Her former science officer had adapted to Alliance protocols with surprising enthusiasm. Configuration unknown, but the drive signature doesn't match any recorded species. ZYX-Thera felt her battle instincts engage, but they were different now. Where once she would have seen an opportunity for conquest, now she saw a potential threat to the species under her protection. Alliance Fleet, this is Captain ZYX-Thera aboard the Unity's Promise, she'd broadcast on the Joint Tactical Channel.
Unknown contacts approaching our position. All vessels prepare for defensive formation Omega-7.
The response was immediate and coordinated. Ships from a dozen different species moved into a protective formation that utilized each race's strengths while covering their weaknesses.
Vorthak heavy cruisers took point positions, their massive armor capable of absorbing tremendous punishment. Zephyrian vessels with their superior shields formed a second line.
Crystal ships provided long-range fire support while ethereal vessels coordinated communications across the fleet. At the center of the formation, human command ships orchestrated the entire operation with the fluid precision that had become their trademark.
Unknown vessels, this is the Galactic Defense Alliance. Admiral Chen's voice came over the communication system.
You are approaching sovereign space. Please identify yourselves and state your intentions. The response came in a burst of harsh, aggressive tones that the translation system struggled to process. When the meaning finally came through, Zyxthera felt a chill run through her carapace. Surrender your vessels and prepare for conquest. The hegemony of eternal dominion claims this territory by right of superior force.
Resistance will result in complete extermination.
The unknown ships were massive, dwarfing even the largest Alliance vessels. Their design suggested a species that had evolved for pure combat efficiency, with no regard for aesthetics or crew comfort.
Everything about them screamed predator.
Sensor analysis, Admiral Chen requested calmly. 14 capital ships, estimated crew complement of 50,000 warriors each, reported the human tactical officer.
Hull composition appears to be some kind of biometal hybrid.
Energy signatures suggest weapons yield approximately 3 times our standard heavy cruiser armament.
Fleet status? 26 Alliance vessels, mixed configuration.
We're outnumbered in terms of raw firepower, but our coordination advantage should compensate. Zyxthera listened to the exchange with growing appreciation for how much her understanding of warfare had evolved. 6 months ago, she would have calculated victory in terms of individual ship strength and total firepower. Now she understood that the Alliance's greatest weapon wasn't their technology, it was their ability to function as a single, coordinated organism.
Unknown vessels, this is Admiral Chen of the Galactic Defense Alliance.
We are prepared to discuss territorial boundaries and trade agreements according to galactic convention. We do not wish conflict, but we will defend ourselves if necessary. The alien response was immediate and hostile. There will be no negotiation. Submit or be destroyed. Well, Admiral Chen said with the calm tone that Zyxthera had learned meant humans were about to do something extraordinary. I suppose that settles that. All vessels, implement pattern Zeta.
Show them what a real Deathworld alliance looks like. What happened next was unlike anything in traditional galactic warfare.
Instead of forming battle lines and exchanging long-range fire, the Alliance fleet seemed to dissolve into chaos. Ships scattered in seemingly random directions, moving independently rather than maintaining formation. The enemy fleet, recognizing what appeared to be a panicked retreat, accelerated forward to capitalize on their advantage. Their massive vessels opened fire with weapons that could have cracked planets, expecting to annihilate the scattered Alliance ships. But the Alliance vessels weren't retreating, they were implementing a tactical doctrine that had been refined over months of joint training. Each ship group had specific objectives that contributed to a larger pattern invisible to enemies who thought in terms of traditional combat. Vorthak heavy cruisers absorbed the initial barrage, their enhanced shields and armor allowing them to survive hits that would have destroyed other vessels. But, instead of returning fire, they used their defensive systems to collect detailed information about enemy weapon characteristics. Zephyrian ships, meanwhile, had deployed thousands of sensor drones throughout the battlefield. These tiny devices, nearly invisible to conventional detection, began mapping the enemy fleet's formation, communication patterns, and tactical responses. Crystalline vessels positioned themselves to create what humans called a sensor web, a coordinated network that could track every enemy ship simultaneously and predict their movement patterns with mathematical precision. Ethereal ships used their advanced communication systems to coordinate data sharing across the entire Alliance fleet, ensuring that every captain had real-time intelligence about the complete tactical situation. And the human ships, positioned at seemingly random points throughout the formation, began implementing what they called chaos theory warfare. Now, Admiral Chen's voice came over the tactical channel. The Alliance fleet suddenly snapped back into coordination, but not the traditional formation the enemy expected. Instead, they formed what could only be described as a living trap. Every enemy vessel found itself simultaneously targeted by multiple Alliance ships positioned at precisely calculated angles.
The Vorthak had provided the defensive intelligence needed to understand enemy weapons.
The Zephyrians had mapped optimal firing solutions. The Crystallines had calculated trajectory predictions.
The Ethereals had coordinated the timing.
And the humans had orchestrated the entire operation as a single, devastating maneuver.
The enemy fleet, designed for straightforward combat between equally matched forces, found themselves facing something completely outside their tactical doctrine. Their superior firepower meant nothing when they couldn't target enemies who seemed to anticipate their every move. Impossible, ZYX-Thera heard one of the enemy commanders broadcast. How are they coordinating across such distances with such precision?
Practice, Admiral Chan replied simply.
The battle was over in less than an hour.
The supposedly superior enemy fleet found themselves completely outmaneuvered by opponents who understood that true strength came from cooperation rather than individual power. As the enemy vessels powered down their weapons and requested terms for surrender, ZYX-Thera realized she was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. For the first time, an aggressive expansionist force had been defeated not by superior technology or overwhelming numbers, but by superior cooperation.
Alliance fleet, stand down to patrol status, Admiral Chun ordered.
Prepare boarding parties for inspection and humanitarian assistance.
ZYX-Thera watched as Alliance ships moved to secure the defeated fleet.
But, instead of the occupation and subjugation that would have followed a Vorthak victory, the Alliance vessels were preparing medical assistance, food distribution, and peaceful contact protocols.
Captain ZYX-Thera, Admiral Chan's voice came over her personal communication channel. I'm assigning you to lead the contact team for this new species. Your experience with integration should be valuable. Understood, Admiral. What are our objectives? Same as always. Find out what drove them to conquest. Determine whether they can be reasoned with.
If so, offer them Alliance membership. If not, ensure they understand what happens to species that threaten our protected territories. Hours later, ZYX-Thera found herself across another negotiation table from another species that had assumed strength meant the right to dominate others. The beings called themselves the hegemony of eternal dominion, and their representative was a massive creature with what appeared to be organic weapon systems integrated into its biology. I am War Prime Devastax, the creature announced in tones that suggested it expected fear in response. I demand to know how inferior species achieved victory over the hegemony's finest fleet.
By not being inferior, ZYX-Thera replied calmly. My name is Captain ZYX-Thera of the Vorthak Integration Corps.
6 months ago, I led a fleet very similar to yours in an attack on this same alliance.
And
I learned that there's a difference between being strong and being dangerous.
ZYX-Thera activated a holographic display showing the current alliance structure.
Every species you see here was either conquered by my empire or threatened by species like yours. They're all here voluntarily, contributing their unique strengths to a collective defense.
Devastax studied the display with obvious confusion. Why would superior species ally with inferior ones?
Because, ZYX-Thera said, we learned that the concept of superior and inferior species is a delusion that weakens everyone who believes it. Every species has strengths that others lack. True power comes from combining those strengths rather than trying to dominate them. She brought up tactical recordings from the recent battle. Your fleet had superior firepower, better armor, and larger ships.
But, you fought as individuals.
We fought as a coordinated organism.
Which approach was more effective?
The War Prime was quiet for a long time, studying the tactical analysis. Finally, it spoke in tones that seemed less aggressive than confused. The hegemony has conquered 47 systems through superior individual strength.
How can cooperation be more effective than power? Because cooperation is power, ZYX-Thera replied. The kind of power that grows stronger instead of weaker as you add members. The kind of power that creates rather than destroys. She leaned forward, recognizing something familiar in the alien's confusion. Let me ask you something, War Prime. What does your species do after you conquer a territory?
Extract resources.
Establish control. Eliminate resistance. And how long does that take? Cycles. Sometimes many cycles before populations become compliant. How much time and energy does your species spend maintaining control over conquered territories? Devastax paused, apparently calculating.
Approximately 60% of our military capacity is dedicated to occupation and control. The Alliance spends 0% of our capacity on occupation, ZYXthera said. Every species here chooses to remain because membership benefits them more than independence would. She brought up economic and technological development statistics from Alliance worlds. Former Vorthak territories are now more productive and more prosperous than they were under our rule. Not because we're extracting resources from them, but because they're contributing resources to shared projects that benefit everyone.
You're suggesting that voluntary cooperation is more efficient than forced compliance? I'm not suggesting it. I'm proving it.
ZYXthera displayed comparative analysis between former Vorthak territories and current hegemony holdings. Your conquered worlds require constant military oversight and produce minimal surplus. Alliance worlds police themselves and contribute to collective projects that increase everyone's capabilities. For the first time since the conversation began, War Prime Devastax seemed genuinely thoughtful rather than aggressive.
If this is true, why do hegemony tactics succeed against individual species? Because individual species can't match your concentrated force.
But cooperative species can do more than match it, they can make it irrelevant.
ZYXthera stood up and walked to the viewport, looking out at the Alliance fleet. Ships from dozens of species worked together with a precision that would have been impossible under any dominance-based system.
War Prime, your species is clearly capable of impressive military achievements.
The question is, would you rather spend your strength maintaining control over unwilling subjects, or would you prefer to contribute that strength to something that makes everyone stronger? You're offering Alliance membership to a species that just attacked you?
We're offering Alliance membership to a species that has the potential to help us protect others from threats they couldn't face alone.
ZYXthera turned back to face the massive alien. The same offer was made to my people 6 months ago.
The same choice, continue trying to dominate, or start trying to defend.
And if the hegemony chooses to continue aggressive expansion?
ZYXthera's expression grew cold in a way that would have been familiar to any species that had faced the old Vorthak Empire. Then, the Alliance will demonstrate why cooperative Deathworlders are more dangerous than competitive ones. And the hegemony will learn what happens when you threaten the people we've sworn to protect. Hours later, as War Prime Devastax was escorted back to his flagship to consult with the hegemony leadership, ZYXthera received a communication from Admiral Chen.
How do you think they'll decide? Chen asked. The same way we did, ZYXthera replied. They'll realize that being part of something bigger than themselves is more appealing than being alone in a hostile universe. And if they don't? ZYXthera looked out at the Alliance fleet, thinking about everything she'd learned about human military doctrine. Then, they'll discover why humans are the galaxy's most dangerous Deathworlders.
Not because you're the strongest individually, but because you're the best at turning enemies into allies and, then, teaching those allies how to be stronger together than they ever could be apart. As the Alliance fleet maintained its protective formation around the surrendered hegemony vessels, ZYXthera reflected on how completely her understanding of strength had changed. The universe wasn't a place where the strong dominated the weak, it was a place where the wise protected everyone else from those who still believed strength meant the right to destroy. And, at the center of that protection was humanity, the species that had taught the galaxy that true Deathworld evolution didn't create perfect predators. It created perfect defenders. The ones who ensured that no one had to face the darkness alone.